Well, Rob, two fresh-faced reporters, 25 days or whatever it is into their time in America. But football never stops back in the UK, and Monday saw Manchester City finally confirm Enzo Maresca as their new head coach. It's been a long time coming. What's the sense from City? I guess they're happy they finally got their man, right?
Yeah, happy that they can finally announce it. I mean, I don't think it was any great secret that this has been coming. I think there was a little bit of frustration on their part that there's been a bit of a delay. I mean, the original plan was to announce it relatively quickly after the end of the season, after Pep Guardiola kind of had his last game and it's fond farewell, that they were hoping to do it quite quickly after that. But, contractual obligations between Maresca and Chelsea have obviously delayed that a little bit. City are kind of saying that they still feel that their relationship with Chelsea is really good. That the main disagreement in all of this was between Maresca and Chelsea rather than City and Chelsea. City have had to pay quite a sizable compensation fee, around sort of £17 million, which is a lot for a manager who essentially was out of work. City are kind of sort of saying that, well, Maresca was their top choice anyway, that to get any kind of top manager, you would have had to pay compensation. So they were expecting to pay compensation for any manager that they approached. But yeah, happy that they've got their man, got it over the line. He can start work before players start returning for a pre-season, before the World Cup players come back. So in that sense, the timing, they're quite relaxed about it. But, like you just said at the top of that, happy that they've got it done and it's over the line.
I think that's an important point about City feeling their relationship with Chelsea is pretty good, because I think we've both been doing this a long time, and it's quite unusual for the old club, the former club, if you like, to issue a statement the likes of which Chelsea did this morning or this afternoon in the UK. And I kind of feel as though what Chelsea are trying to do there is almost rewrite the narrative of last season, and kind of challenge this idea that effectively, this is an ownership that changes managers on a whim, and they don't have a plan, and they make decisions sort of scattergun. I think what they're trying to sort of say here is actually, Maresca was agitating for a move, and that he had informed them quite early on in last season that he was talking to City about potentially replacing Pep Guardiola. Now, we reported some of that in January when Maresca left. Just take us back a little bit to that, because I think people need to understand that, we can't always write what we know. We have to write what we're being told at the same time, if you see what I mean. And so just how strong was City at the time in kind of playing down those suggestions? Because obviously it wasn't just us. It was being reported in a number of places that Maresca was talking to City, that City were potentially succession planning. Just as somebody who obviously covers City closely, what was that period like? How robust were they in their denials?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that we've been here before with Guardiola. There have been a number of occasions during his 10 years at City where it looked as if it was coming to an end. He came in and immediately sort of started talking about, doing 3 years like he'd done at Bayern and Barcelona. So we had been here before with Pep Guardiola. There was an awful lot of noise this time around the possibility that he could be going. That only intensified when you were reporting and the people around Chelsea were reporting that part of the reason that Maresca had ended up leaving Chelsea was because City had made it aware that there could possibly be a vacancy at City at the end of the year. City were quite adamant that, right up until the end really, that Pep's our manager, he's got an extra year on his contract, and we expect him to be our manager. The one thing that kind of led people to believe that maybe there was more in it this time is that City were a little bit annoyed at what had happened or what came out from Chelsea at that time. But sometimes when things like this come out, they are absolutely adamant that, we're just knocking it down, we're killing it completely. That they didn't this time, around sort of December, January time, which led people to believe that possibly they were waiting for Pep. And I think that's also an important element of this, that, City for a long time sort of said, well, this is Pep. He could wake up one day and go, I've had enough of this. I'm tired. I've got no energy. I'm leaving. And at that point, City would have had to go out and find someone pretty quickly. On the flip side of that, they also said, and even were saying quite late on this season, we're saying that you could also wake up and go, oh, this squad's quite good, actually. I think I can get another sort of Premier League title out of this squad. I'm actually going to stay. And obviously he had that extra year in his contract, that there was this quite a clever buffer, really, in a way, because he got so annoyed, over the years with questions about his future, that effectively built in this 1-year buffer that every time that anyone asked about his future in press conferences, he could just go, "I've got 1-year contract. Like, are you? Can you not read? I've got a contract. Like, I'm not going anywhere," kind of thing. So there was all of this kind of stuff swirling around. It became quite apparent, probably months before that the actual decision came from Pep, that he was sort of leaning towards leaving. And City have always kind of framed themselves as this really kind of well-run, prepared, prepped club, and that they, once the announcement came or the decision came from Pep, that they were ready to kind of move and get someone in, get their first choice in quite quickly. And obviously, knowing what we know now, it seems as if that's the case. Obviously, there's been this delay now with the compensation claim and things, but City are happy that they've got their main man. They are adamant. I mean, you'll be able to tell us more about this. They are adamant that this disagreement, or the kind of the row element of all this, is between, or has been between, Maresca and Chelsea rather than City and Chelsea. And they've been quite keen this morning to remind us of that.
Yeah, and that is the case. And, and it's significant that in that Chelsea statement, they categorically make it clear that Maresca has paid Chelsea a fee and currently in the process of trying to find out how much that is. But I'm led to believe it's significant, to actually complete this deal, that he's had to, and actually I remember at the time when we were talking about Maresca leaving, whether we were able to say, okay, so was he sacked? Did he resign? Was it mutual consent? And it was one of those, and this quite often happens when it's messy. It was one of those where the brief from sort of all sides was, well, you just have to say parted company, because obviously resigning means it's on the manager, sacked means it's on the club, and that has legal ramifications. And because there was already a legal battle in play, it sort of was fudged at the time, and clearly that legal battle has taken 6 months to play out. And I think, as I was sort of alluding to earlier, that there is this perception about the Chelsea ownership that they don't have a plan, or that they change their mind very quickly, or that they're difficult to work for. And there were a lot of stories that came out about Maresca and the sort of tensions behind the scenes, the issues he had with what he felt was interference from the ownership. He felt he didn't have enough of a say in recruitment. He felt that the medical department was too influential in terms of making players available and dictating how long players would be available for. That's why you saw it with how methodical a lot of the substitutions were. Players would, if they played longer than an hour, there would be repercussions for that if the manager had been told beforehand that an hour was the limit. So it was all these sort of tensions that were bubbling up. I guess to some extent we might never know how much of that was Maresca genuinely being irritated by it, or agitating to create a situation where he could get out and then join City. We'll probably never know. But there was certainly, I think, from Chelsea's point of view, the fact that they've made Xabi Alonso manager rather than head coach, I think is, that some people might look at that as think that's just a superficial thing, but I think that's an acknowledgement that the balance behind the scenes was wrong. And actually, when in the podcast, sort of at the back end of last season, I did talk about how I thought that Chelsea were going to change their approach a little bit, and I think they've sort of reflected on the circumstances around Maresca leaving. Obviously, the sort of somewhat of a disaster that Liam Rossini was as an appointment, and finishing 10th in the Premier League, and sort of saying, actually, do you know what? I think we need to tweak the model a little bit. And I think there's a couple of things in that. One is that they're looking for a slightly older profile of player mixed in with the younger ones. Granit Xhaka obviously is, the sort of prime example of that. He's a player that he's 34 in September. They never would have gone for a player like that, last season, but they recognise that they need more leadership in that dressing room, and they need sort of experience around this talented younger group. But also that, whatever Maresca's motivations, the fact of the matter is that he felt he had earned the right to have more of a say over team affairs. And, as head coach, that was particularly limited in certain regards. And I think what we're seeing with Xabi Alonso, of course, work with Xhaka and, at Leverkusen, and they have a great relationship, is that I think you're seeing now uh, learnings of the Maresca era, almost no matter what sort of happened. I mean, I guess in terms of City, just to flip that on its head, do you think he is going to have the same authority as Guardiola? I mean, I know he obviously doesn't have the same reputation, the same experience, the same winning pedigree, but is there any sense yet of is it like for like, or are they kind of, are there guardrails around him a bit more than Guardiola had?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's interesting because over 10 years, Pep became this kind of figurehead at City and the almost like the boss of everything. I remember in press conferences, he used to say, I'm not involved in that area, or I'm not involved in this area. And actually, when you spoke to people behind the scenes, that was just not true. You spoke to the people who worked in the academy, the head of the academy, who said that everything goes through the Pep. The whole kind of ethos of the club came from him. Now, I don't think that immediately is going to be put on Enzo Maresca. I mean, the word right now is, in his first day in the job, is that he's going to be very much focused on the first team, which I completely understand, because it's a massive job for anyone to step into Pep Guardiola's shoes, given how much he's won and how much success he's had. I think from City's point of view, Maresca is their first choice, but there's no one there daft enough to think that this isn't a risk. But they also know that hiring anyone to replace Pep Guardiola would have been a risk. And so what they've tried to do is minimise as many of those risks as possible. Maresca is coming back for a third spell. He's worked in the academy before. He was Pep's assistant for a year. So he's already got relationships with Ferran Soriano, with the chairman, Khaldoon, which helps. Vitally, he's already got relationships with some really key players in that dressing room. He was there as assistant in the treble-winning year, so he knows Erling Haaland, Ruben Diaz, Rodri, all people who are in that leadership group. And remember covering United when David Moyes took over from Sir Alex Ferguson. One of the problems that David Moyes had was that he just didn't win over those key players quickly enough, and he's almost fighting this kind of inward war from the minute he steps foot in the club, and he just never got to grips with it. Whereas Enzo Maresca, and I can understand why a lot of City fans will look at it and be a little bit underwhelmed and think, oh, well, why can't we go and get Luis Enrique from PSG? Well, I think City think that Enzo Maresca is the right guy for right now, because he will walk in, immediately command the respect of the likes of Haaland and Rodri and Diaz, who will also command the respect of the rest of that dressing room. He plays in a very similar way to Pep Guardiola. I mean, Jamie Vardy, who worked with him at Leicester, has called him a Pep clone in the way that he wants to work. So there won't be any major changes to the playing style, which helps the players. There will be tweaks here and there because they're not the same guy, but there will be the general pattern of play will be very, very similar. So all of this stuff, I think City believe that if anyone is going to take over from Pep Guardiola and give it a really good go, it is Enzo Maresca. Again, they're not naive enough not to understand that this is a massive job and a massive responsibility for him, and that it's a risk, and it would have been a risk for anyone. But they believe that they've got the right man. And in terms of Maresca, it's interesting in the statement you just said there about how the way Chelsea are run. In the quotes that we got given from Maresca today, he speaks specifically about City setup and how well run a club it is, and how they provide the perfect conditions for a manager to be successful. And that's certainly something that Pep had said. And it's interesting then when you set that against what he believes he's leaving at Chelsea, which essentially is that he didn't have the right conditions to be successful. I mean, I actually think, from just to cap it all off, I think everyone's got what they wanted from this. City get Maresca, Maresca gets City, Chelsea get to kind of explain what happened last season, and they also get a very, very good manager in Xabi Alonso. So I think it's one of those situations where there obviously has been a little bit of a row and disagreement between different parties. But I think sitting here now, I mean, you'll be able to speak better from Chelsea's point of view, but I think sitting here now, everyone seems to have got what they wanted, right?
Well, and you're forgetting 17 million quid as well, which is not, for a team that's now not in Europe next season, that's actually quite a handy sum of money for them. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the fact that Chelsea have ended up landing Xabi Alonso is obviously a very exciting appointment, courted by other clubs, and is somebody who I think will really enthuse the fan base in a way that obviously Liam Rossini didn't, and to some extent Enzo Maresca didn't for quite a lot of the time. It is worth just sort of, not rewriting history on that. That even though he was successful, there were quite often, grumblings about the style of play, about how he communicated. He never really was fully embraced by the Chelsea fans, I think. So from that point of view, I think they'd be more excited by Xabi Alonso. And look, I think it's easier now for Chelsea to draw a line under this than move on, knowing Alonso's starting work on officially it's the 1st of July, isn't it? So next week, or this week, Wednesday. So it helps everybody kind of move on from this whole period. And yeah, I mean, Maresca was a successful manager from the point of view that he delivered 2 trophies. And there was a period, I think, even last season, in the early part of last season, where you sort of felt as though they were really building something. I remember when they played Arsenal at Stamford Bridge and they had 10 men in that game for quite a lot of it. And Reece James was incredible that day, and they really gave Arsenal a game 10v11 that most others didn't do 11v11. And there was a few times where I was doing Chelsea games where the opposition manager in the press conference afterwards would talk about how well coached they were and how well drilled they are, and it would happen often enough that I always remember that with Arteta at Arsenal early on when they were struggling. Jose Mourinho, and there were other managers. I think Bielsa even, would sort of talk about how well that is a seriously well coached team. That what they're doing is very, very good, and there's clearly something building. And I just got that sense with Maresca that from a tactical point of view, it was starting to go somewhere. But yeah, I mean, emotionally that wasn't the case, and clearly he had his head turned by City for quite a long period of time. So yeah, I think you're right. I think in the end, everybody's moved on, and everybody will be happy with where they are.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it's important that the clubs can move on to next season, feeling that they've got what they've wanted. And like you said, I'm sure that Chelsea want to draw a line on the next season. City, it's going to be a particularly tough season anyway. Transitioning away from someone like Pep Guardiola, they think that they've got the right guy at the right time to help them do that. Whether he's the right guy to do 10 years is another matter. But I think it's important to get the appointment right now. I mean, like you said there, he did get a lot of plaudits for the way that he played football. He's also Premier League proven, which helps in what we like to think is the most competitive league in the world. I just think it's one of those. I think everyone, Maresca, Chelsea and City, will be happy today that it's all done and dusted and they can move forward.